You've been recruited to open the files and learn about the top news and stories from the NL Central right here on Central Intelligence, a Slasher Sports baseball podcast presented by Slasher Sports. It's always available on our YouTube channel and our Spotify podcast feed. I am Special Agent in charge of National League Central Affairs and your host, Steve Feck. Follow the podcast on Twitter at Slasher Baseball. You can share your comments, submit questions, give us show suggestions via email slasherbaseball@yahoo.com. And be sure to join the ever-growing Slasher Sports community on Discord so we can keep all of these conversations going. We release unredacted files every Thursday, but it ain't just me releasing stuff, folks. Christian Rao is revealing his previews on every FBS program on Slasher U. Billy Graves keeps you entertained, discussing new and classic horror films and the people who make them at Slasher Sports Cinema. And if you need a smile and a positive affirmation to start your week off right, check out Suki Suburbia's Honeydew Project on Mondays. Fear not, if you couldn't keep up with all of the unique offerings we have here, you can just visit slashersports.com and you can get links to all the different shows. You can read the various articles, for the various shows that we have. And subliminal advertising hint, there's a merchandise shop too. There's a lot of great stuff, including Central Intelligence shirts. You can get hats, you can get coasters, you can get clocks, all kind of stuff is available with the various things there. So we hope you do check that out. Again, that's slashersports.com. Well, the All-Star game is behind us, finally, thankfully. I mean, I know it's fun. I know, especially for kids, and I'm going back many decades when I was a child. I mean, the All-Star game was a big deal. I mean, I am old enough where I voted in the very first fan balloting for All-Stars. And I made all kind of crazy choices, when I voted. I mean, I think the one that sticks in my mind most was Don Mincher for the Seattle Pilots. That's the one that sticks in my mind. I don't know why I had a Don Mincher obsession. I mean, great baseball player. I mean, great baseball man and administrator. I want to say he was president of the Southern League for a long, long time. But as far as all-stars, there's Poog Powell in the American League at that time, Tony Horton in Cleveland. There were all kind of players that were certainly maybe more deserving than my Don Mincher vote. But still, I think it's great that the fans have a voice. I think we need to somehow temper that voice a little bit. Maybe only have fans vote once. Maybe say have players and front office executives, for example, select maybe let's say 3 or 4 best players at every position, have a poll, vote among themselves, then have the online vote for the fans for those 4 that the professionals have picked. Because again, it's not only, there's some popularity contest aspect to it, but really, I mean, you're getting the vote of your peers. You're getting the vote of the people that run front offices and that do scouting or whoever would be part of this decision. Take the media out of it and let the fans make their choices, even if it is because of popularity. At least you've got the 4 most representative players, on that online ballot. So, I mean, what do I know? I'm an old cranky old man, so maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe we can just keep having it be what it is. And I think for the most part, we had the best players moving on to the final round. You're always going to debate about, oh, this guy should have been there, that guy should have been there. You're always going to have that. But it's all behind us now. No more of this home run derby crap. Again, these are the kind of things it's something you should go back to, where you have, like they used to in the late 50s, early 60s, have this be an off season or a spring training kind of exhibition, bring in the people there and they match up sort of like a bracket kind of format. I mean, it would be a home run derby, March Madness kind of a deal, for example. Don't, there's too many things that could go wrong when you have a hitter participate in the home run derby. I mean, I realize, especially for the younger players, it's a big deal. They grew up watching it. But I mean, honestly, there's just too much hoopla on the off-field stuff. There's not enough focus. There's not enough importance on the All-Star game itself. It does not mean nearly what it meant when I was growing up, and what I'm sure what even going through. Maybe I think the last, let's say, 10 or 15 years, I think it's really become more of a television event and less of an actual competitive event, less of a sports event, and it being more entertainment. But again, it's behind us now. And this week's background checks, where we always look at information that happened in the previous week, and see how it applies to the National League Central. We don't go through every game, every box score. We're not going to throw a whole bunch of analytic statistics at you. We're going to just take a look at it and pick one or two things out for each of the NL Central teams, for you to think about. If you just say, okay, that's an interesting point. I really hadn't thought of that, or I agree with that, or I said, well, I think that's dumb. Whatever it is, whatever your reaction is, the reaction is what we want. We don't care what the reaction is. We just want the reaction. But we don't want to just keep spitting out information that every other podcast and all the other sports providers, whether it be ESPN or Fox or Sportsnet if you're in Canada, we don't want to just keep regurgitating the same stuff. We want to take kind of unique looks at things, and we're focusing on the National League Central. Now, if you look behind me, I mean, my fat body is blocking some of it, but you will see, if you look behind me, the National League Central standings as of the All-Star break, as of the games played on Sunday. And the column that I really wanted to be able to show, but we couldn't get it to format properly, in the background there, is teams' records over the last 10 games before the All-Star. This is what we, at the All-Star break, before games resume again, what we're looking at now on the screen, if you're watching on YouTube, or as I describe it, if you're listening to the podcast audio feed, these are the actual results. This is what happened from opening day until the All-Star break. And the results, as it applies to the National League Central, are right there. Okay, it's right there, for the digestion, for the contemplation, but numbers don't lie. This is what it is. I mean, as of right now, if the playoffs were to begin today, the Cincinnati Reds would win the NL Central, have an automatic, bid, if you will, to the playoffs. The Brewers would be outside of the wild card race by a half a game, but only one game separates the Reds and the Brewers on top of the division. Why I wanted to look at the last 10 games rather, before the All-Star game, is that I think it's quite telling that the margin between the first place Cincinnati Reds and the second place Milwaukee Brewers, who did take 2 of 3 at home from the Reds, by the way, it's a 1-game difference. The Reds were 7-3. Brewers were 6-4. If you look under the GB, or games back column, that's 1 game. 1 game difference over the last 10, 1 game difference on the season totals. So things are really now getting truly interesting. Now, even despite the Brewers taking 2 of 3 from the Reds, and plus there was a terrific 1-0 game in there. I mean, Wade Miley pitched a fantastic game for the Brewers, and Ben Lively surprised that he gave up the game's only run, but he went 5 2/3, was very effective. So that 1 game, difference between what these teams did in the previous 10 games, we need to start looking at the NL pennant race in snippets, in snapshots. We're going to look at it 7 games, 10 games at a time, because what's happening during those things are what you're going to see eventually reflected in the standings. Not every week is going to have a Reds-Brewers matchup, or a Cards-Brewers, or a Cubs-Brewers and Reds-Pirates. You're not going to have those matchups every week. Wish we were, but the new schedule kind of eschews that, and we're going to start seeing more divisional games later in the year, late August through September. But this these snippets, these 7 games, or in this case, we're talking about the last 10 games. If you look at that and compare it to the previous week's standings, it's giving you a clear picture. Forget about breaking down, games and actions and this should happen, that should happen. At the end of the game, at the end of the day, a win is a win and a loss is a loss. You can't expect statistics to change based on formulas. You can't weight things to make things look the way you want them to look at if you're a big analytics geek. Numbers don't lie. Wins are wins, losses. So we're going to talk about coming up this week, and we got another Reds-Brewers series. This time the Brewers will travel to Cincinnati for a 3-game series. I really like that bookend series. And it worked out perfectly in that the first and second place in the National League Central were playing each other bookending. I would love to see that because you have an odd number of teams that can't work perfectly, but I would like to see 4 of the 5 divisional teams have bookend series before and after the All-Star break. I think that's a really neat thing. You can basically build some momentum going into the All-Star break. And if things didn't work out the way you wanted to in those bookend series, you can then ride momentum that you can build in the very next series coming. Another thing about the Reds and Brewers that aren't shown in a standard standings when you're looking at it is that the Brewers over 47 home games, they're 5 games over 500. The Reds over 47 road games are 27-20. There's 7 games over 500. So that just adds fuel to, what's firing and what's driving this Cincinnati Reds team to a pennant race after the All-Star break that nobody expected. Nobody expected the Reds to be in. Even the most die-hard of Reds fan, and there's a lot of them, there's some great Reds fans, I don't think they expected the Reds to be in first place at the All-Star break in 2023. If you're familiar with their system, you could say 2024 and going forward, the Reds, we've got Big Red Machine 2 building and churning and winning divisions. But I don't think anybody looked at it at this particular point. But the fact that the Reds are 7 games over 500 on the road, and the Brewers are only 5 games over at home, plus you factor in the run differentials and the losing Pythagorean record for the Brewers. Now you do have factors that you can look at and say, okay, this is going to be at least a 2-team race. I think at this point, it's a 2-team race. I mean, the Cubs and Cardinals went 5-5 in their 10 games before the All-Star break. So they kept their heads above water. They're all below 500. The Cardinals are in last place. Was it 14 games under 500? The Cubs are 5 games under 500. But during this time where they could have, in theory, tried to make up some ground as the Reds and Brewers are beating up each other, they were just treading water. In treading water, that's great if you're in the Coast Guard and you're trying to do, some kind of ocean or, sea rescue. That's great that you're treading water. That doesn't work if you're trying to win a division. And I'm not buying into the thing is like, well, they're kind of like stalking the leaders and they're wanting to see if they falter or they tire and they can turn on the Jets and catch them. The Cardinals aren't going to turn on the Jets and catch anybody. Maybe the Pirates. Maybe they'll pass the Pirates and not finish last. I even have my doubts about that, quite honestly, but that could happen. But with the Cubs, who are they have the most realistic chance of getting back in this division. And again, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, we've got it right behind us here. You can take a look at the numbers for yourself. You're listening to the podcast feed. Cubs, they're 7 games off the pace in the division. 6 games behind the Brewers, 7 games behind the first place Reds. So you can't just tread water anymore. You got to start to put series wins together, work a couple of sweeps in there, maybe get a streak going. It's the only way that you're going to be relevant in the division. And you want to do it quickly before the trade deadline hits on August 1st. because you got to start making your plans and making your decisions now. You can't wait until the night before the deadline or 2 hours before the deadline and say, yeah, you know what? Yeah, we're not going to win the division, so we're going to make this move or that move or what. They have got to do more than just be 5-5, be a 500 club going forward. They've got to both teams got to put something together. The Cardinals just to salvage some aspect of their season. The Cubs, if they really believe they are a division contender, they need to do it, right away. Then we have my hometown Pittsburgh Pirates. Again, if you look there, they're slumping. They were 3-7 over the last 10 games going into the All-Star break. We've talked about this a couple of times in previous episodes of Central Intelligence. The Pirates were a great story in April. They were 20-8. They were the talk and the darlings of baseball. Even before the Reds started bringing up all the talent they have, the Pirates were the feel-good story, certainly in the NL Central, but probably in all of baseball. Things kind of leveled up. There's an equilibrium that developed here, and now the Pirates are starting to bring up the pieces that Ben Cherington has so carefully crafted and put together through the trading of veteran players or players getting ready for free agency. There was a plan all along. I know Pirate fans didn't want to hear it every time, a veteran player that was putting up decent numbers got traded because of, they wanted to get prospects. But Cherington was putting together pieces that were going to be major league ready relatively quickly. I say all along, this was a 5-year plan. This is year 4. And the Pirates still show, signs of being a team that's going to have to be reckoned with going forward in future seasons. I even think, they could be a wild card contender next year in 2024. But Ben Cherington, and let me say, Ben Cherington is on my GM Mount Rushmore. Okay. I mean, if I had to put 4 current general managers on some kind of monument, it would be Cherington, it would be Dave Dombrowski, it would be Eric Neander, and it would be Alex Anthopoulos. Now, I realize in some of these cases, technically these guys' titles are not general manager, but let's not fool ourselves. These are the guys making the final. So Cherington is right there. I would trust Cherington with any any club that I might own, or that I might be, let's say, a president and have to bring in a baseball ops guy that's going to turn things around and build an organization. Ben Cherington would be one of my 4 choices up there on that Mount Rushmore. And Rushmore is kind of an interesting pun because you have to Rushmore the better you get. And I think there's a lot of general managers, one of them in this division, that's heading the last place team. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that. I don't want to keep dumping on the Cardinals. I mean, I think subliminally, I'm really frustrated by just how poorly the Cardinals. And they should be better than this. And they, John Mozeliak, as a rule, up until, let's say, the last year and a half, 2 years, I think that he was doing a lot of things right. But, this organization has just lost its way. I mean, it really has. But back to the Pirates. Given that they sort of limped in to the All-Star break, given that they've got some injuries, Andrew McCutchen, Brian Hayes, I think they're going to start bringing in even more people. Their top pitching prospect, Quinn Priester, I imagine we're going to see him sooner rather than later. They're going to start giving opportunities, except at one position, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. They're going to give guys opportunities to show that they have a role, that they, even if they're not going to be necessarily starters, they have a role on what is going to be the future contending teams that are going to go out there starting last year, starting next year. And it's been one of those days, folks. But the Pirates, can they hold off the Cardinals? I think that's the race now that you're looking at. And that would do a world of good not only for Pirate fans, but in that clubhouse, if they can hold off the Cardinals and not finish in last place. And you have to remember too, if they finish 72 and 90, that's a 10-game improvement over last year. That might not seem like much because you're 72 and 90. You're still 9 games under, but it's really, really important for the Pirates to make the most at the same time, starting to give these young players that they've assembled every opportunity to prove that they belong in the long-term plans and not just the short term. So that's our background checks. Take it as you will, but bottom line is teams with winning weeks are winning teams. Teams that are at 500 are either, in this case of the NL Central, they're below 500, and teams that are struggling only winning 3 out of their last 10. Now it's time to start looking at prospects and not focusing on prospects of a dream of chasing down an NL Central division. I want to touch on the draft a little bit. And again, I'm not going to break it down, like a scout and talk about, all the things and, these grades they give all of these kids. I don't want to get that deep, but I don't want to go through every team's draft from pick 1, through 20. I want to take a look at the first round picks, and that will include the supplemental round picks, the compensation A round pick. I want to take a look at those guys that each of the 5 NL Central teams drafted. And I sort of I'm going to rank them, if you will. I mean, I'm going to give my initial reactions, my gut feelings about how this is going to play out in the future, just based on the first round. Okay, it's bad enough the draft takes 3 days to get through. This is like a 45-minute podcast, give or take. I don't want to bore you. I just want to kind of take a look at who the first, because really people remember first round picks. They're not remembering an 8th round pick or a 19th round pick or whatever it would be, unless they become surprise stars. And then everybody's talking about, well, he was only picked in the 19th round, and look what he's doing now. Now he's starting the All-Star game or whatever. So I'm ranking the first round picks, including the Comp A picks for the teams in the NL Central. And for me, the winner of the first round is the team that's in last place, the St. Louis Cardinals. They drafted Arizona outfielder Chase Davis. And I'll be honest, if I was sitting in the Pirates war room, if I had a voice in that draft, I would not give up until the pick was in, pitching the Pirates to go outside the box and draft Chase Davis 1-1, first overall pick. That is how highly I think about this young man. He's a guy that not only has a high floor, he has a really high ceiling, and I think it's a realistic ceiling that he can break. He is the best pure hitter in this draft, I believe. Does he have issues with swinging and missing sometimes? Yes. Yes, he does. I mean, I think he was still trying to figure things out on many levels. But he has a beautiful swing. It's easy. When the bat hits, when the ball hits the bat, it just seems like it's a video game, or it's some kind of Hollywood movie scene when he hits a ball. It's that beautiful. If you haven't had a chance to see him hit, go on YouTube or wherever you want to look at ncaa.com. I'm sure you're going to be able to see videos of Chase Davis' swing. It's incredible. His raw power, I don't think he's even tapped into all of his power potential yet. And as far as raw power, he may, if not the highest raw power metrics, he's certainly in the top 3, top 5. So as crazy as it would seem that to draft the guy that a lot of people probably didn't even know about, Chase Davis, that would have been the guy. If I was Ben Cherington, I would have gone for him. his maturity, his intelligence. He's well spoken. He is a natural leader. He is the guy that the Cardinals will always be able to depend on. He's going to be vocal enough to be out there out front in the press. Let's say a Carlos Correa type, maybe not quite as snarky, but he's going to be that guy, Andrew McCutcheon in the Pirate. He's going to be the guy that's going to always be out. I mean, Goldschmidt and Arenado, yes, I mean they're leaders, but not this kind of leader. Chase Davis is going to make a huge impact on the fortunes of a Cardinals. They're not going to tear things down and rebuild. I really don't believe that. They do need to retool. They need to make some changes in the front office and in the dugout. But Chase Davis is a guy that I think he will be better than all of the Cardinals outfielders that everybody raves about now. He'll be better than Jordan Walker. He'll be better than Lars Nootbaar, better than Dylan Carson. He's that kind of a special player. In fact, I'm going to really go out on a limb here. And should I live long enough to do 5-6 years of this podcast, you can come back to me and say, oh, remember when you said this about Chase Davis, but it doesn't work out? Very few players have the bat control and the ability to kind of whip that bat through the strike zone. When I watch Chase Davis swing, I immediately think of Barry Bonds coming out of Arizona State. I'm not saying he's going to be Barry Bonds. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying to you is that this guy is special. Listening to him, during the combine, I actually watched most of the MLB combine coverage on MLB Network. Listening to him speak, interact. I mean, he made an impression on just about everybody that he spoke to. Chase Davis by himself, and it was the only first-round pick. The Cardinals didn't have any compensation picks. They didn't pick again to the third round, if I'm not mistaken. Chase Davis is that good. So just his selection, his presence in that organization, I'm going to say that the Cardinals won the first round just with that one player. And, of course, many of you are saying, "What? But the Pirates went 1-1. How could they not have won? They got a generational talent in Paul Skeens. Paul Skeens had a dream season in 2020, his second after transferring from Air Force Academy. He had a dream season for LA. He had some kind of ridiculous, 209 strikeouts. He had a sub-2 ERA. He pitched big in big games. He was that pitcher you couldn't take your eyes off during this tournament run. Throughout this season, everything that he did went right. I'm pumping the brakes a little bit about being a generational talent, not because he's not a talented pitcher. He's only really done it for 1 year. It's an amazing year. And I think I've said before on this podcast that, like a league MVP, if you win a league MVP, you're automatically inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Maybe not necessarily, maybe you're in a little side room, maybe you're not in the main rooms there. But I think if you win a league MVP, whether it be American or National League, you automatically earn induction into the Baseball Hall of Fame. So if you were going to use that scenario to apply it to Paul Skeens, he would be in the College Baseball Hall of Fame because of the season he put up. The LSU Tigers, as talented and as deep as they were, do not win the College World Series without Paul Skeens pitching. And what really makes me nervous is all the comparisons to Steven Strasburg. When I see his body makeup and I watch his motion, and I get chills thinking, oh my God, this guy is one serious arm injury away of never being able to fulfill the expectations of a pick that's 1-1. I'm proud of the Pirates for signing a guy that's probably going to cost them above slot maybe. The Pirates as an organization, even under Neil Huntington, always try to spread their bonus pool money throughout the draft, not just in the first round or the second round. They would go down into the later rounds. if they can get the line on a guy. I think Josh Bell was one of those examples that they were able to get him and have him not play more college ball. They got him to sign with them because they had the bonus pool money, and they took him a little bit later because people thought it was a foregone conclusion. And Skeens, okay, he averages 98. He's topping out over 100 on a regular basis. Now, college radar guns are infamous for those with more inside info for being a little skewed. They're not as accurate. If you used college baseball radar guns, with the state police and you got pulled over, you'd probably be able, with the right lawyer, to get your ticket thrown out because they're not necessarily calibrated the way they should be. It's the polite way. By all accounts, he's a great teammate. He's an even better person than he is a baseball player. And like we were talking about with Chase Davis in St. Louis, that is huge. The Pirates can use that because eventually Andrew McCutchen's not going to be there. You're going to have all these young players. Some will have some struggles with English, so they can't really be a verbal leader out, with the press and out that way. Paul Skeens checks off a lot of boxes, but let's just hold off saying he's a generational talent. I'm not quite there yet. I hope he proves me wrong. I live in Pittsburgh, so I see virtually every Pirate game. I want to see him successful and have a wonderful career and win a Cy Young or two, but I'm just pumping the brake. Okay. Their comp pick was Mitch Jebb from Michigan State. Nice infielder. He was 42 overall. He grades out as at a 65, and that's a scale between 20 and 80 is the standard MLB scouting rating, if you will. And he grades out a 65 as a hitter and as a base runner. It doesn't look, it looks ugly when he's at the plate. He just has one of those swings and one of those approaches at the plate where you're like, how is this guy even fouling off balls, let alone driving balls to all fields? But he's able to do that. And I again, he's a guy, he's athletic enough that it could maybe play other places in the infield, but it's your typical guy that Ben Cherington just keeps adding to the organization. I'm not sure many organizations have as many high ceiling middle infielders as the Pirates do. I mean, it's pretty amazing, what they've assembled here. So his ability to get on base, again, he's another guy with high strike. He does chase curveballs. He does have problems with swing and miss sometimes, but his ability to get on base, I think, is going to make him, even if he's in a utility role, it's going to make him a guy that's going to hit one, that's going to hit two, hit at the top of the lineup, get on base for the thumpers. So then you're sliding guys like Brian Reynolds and O'Neill Cruz, Key Brian Hayes down, in Henry Davis down in the run producing slot. So I think he's just someone. I put a lot of stock in players that have big performances their first time in the Cape Cod League. He was second in the league in hitting, hit 356, 429, 919. That was his slash line. He had 26 steals, scored 40 runs. That's a nice addition. So that solidified the Pirates in the second slot. I was almost going to go chalk and have the Pirates, since they had the first overall pick, be my favorite, what I would give a confidence rating or a top ranking to in the division. But I think so much of Chase Davis, even with Jebb complimenting there with Skeens, the Pirates are a solid second. I think Cincy has themselves a nice draft, and a draft that's going to help them, perhaps not right away, but there might be a guy, their first round pick they might do the David Price thing like Tampa Bay did when they took him out of Vanderbilt and put him in the bullpen. And that's Rhett Lauder of Wake Forest. I saw a lot of Wake Forest baseball this year. There was something about him in the preseason. I thought, but this is an interesting roster. Plus changeup, plus curve. He's not a guy that's going to light up radar guns. He's not going to blow you away with, fastballs, sliding over or rising in the zone. He's a polished pitcher. He's a complete pitcher. If you can get your changeup and your curve over on a regular basis, and really he can get all of his repertoire in the strike zone on a consistent. He has the highest floor, I think, of anybody in this draft because he is what he is. What you saw with Rhett Lauder in college, especially this year, maybe there's an uptick in the fastball. Maybe. I don't think that he needs it with the changeup that he has. I doubt the Reds are going to bring him up, but I guarantee you there's going to be discussions with Nick Krall in the front office in Cincinnati. Well, maybe history can repeat. Maybe we can make him a David Price kind of pitcher, give him confidence, put him in increasing leverage roles throughout September. And if the Reds do make the playoffs, win the division, or win a wild card spot, you've got a dangerous weapon at the back of your bullpen, and they already have Diaz. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I really, really like this pick a lot because Lauder will probably never rise above the number 3 starter role in the majors. That's just the guy that he is. He's a right-handed Sid Fernandez, if you will. He's not going to be a staff ace, but he's going to somehow win probably even more games than your aces will. I think he's going to be able to, put up a lot of quality starts, eat some innings, and I really do believe that he could pitch in the major leagues in a pennant race this year. That's how impressed I've been, with him. Their Comp A pick is another college pitcher, also from LSU, Ty Floyd. If you were watching the College World Series, you probably fell in love with this guy and you wanted your team to draft him. And the Reds, I think, were surprised that he was still there in the compensation A round, and they nabbed him up. I don't know that he's not a guy you're going to see in 2023. I would even, other than maybe a September audition, I'd be shocked that you'd see him in 2024. There has to be a lot of injuries and a lot of things going right for him. He does have command issues. I mean, not with his fastball. I mean, which has a really nice rising mode. It's like a sneaky last minute rise to his fastball. But he knows how to pitch. He's not afraid of the spotlight. He's not afraid of pressure situations. He is a guy that's going to settle into the back of that Reds rotation so now you got Hunter Green and you got Lodolo and you've got Andrew Abbott. You've got Lauder and you've got Ty Floyd. That's one hell of a rotation. And that's dismissing guys like Williamson, not even in that conversation. Cardinals and Pirates had hopeful drafts. Cardinals had a helpful draft with these two. So I'm kind of sticking them in the middle there. They're in the middle of the division as far as first round success. Milwaukee, I really love their Brock Winken set the ACC record for career home runs. His power totals, his home run totals and extra base totals went up every year. Freshman, sophomore, junior. Exactly what you want to see from a guy with just prodigious power. He had, let me look at this again. 17 homers as a freshman, 23 as a sophomore, 31 as a junior. He's Sal Bando 2.0. Really strong arm. I think people say, well, gee, he's kind of slow. I don't know if he can really have the range. He positions himself well. He obviously looks at scouting reports and takes them to heart and applies them where his positioning is. He's going to be a major league starting third baseman. So there's Sal Bando. It's a little bit of Ramirez in his game as well, I think. But, I mean, they could use the third baseman in the Brewers system. He is probably only going to have to spend one season in the minors. He does strike out more than I think a lot of people would like. But when you've got that kind of power, I think you kind of live with that, especially the fact that he can contribute defensively. He's just someone I was a little surprised that he was there at 18. But the Brewers had to have been beside themselves with the fact that he was there at the 18th pick. He, to a degree, and I always think of this, I think of him as almost like a Pedro Serrano type. He's going to get the big homers, but he goes, fastball, I like very much. Curveball, not like. I mean, he has trouble with the curveball. I think that's why he needs to have at least one full season in the minors, maybe a season and a half. So maybe you don't see him till May, June of 2025. But when he comes up, he's a difference maker. He's a cleanup hitter, a 3 or 4 hitter, to complement what they're going to have there in Milwaukee. So I really liked the Brewers picking him. I also like the high school pitcher they got in the comp round, up at the top of the comp round, the 33rd pick. He's a cold weather pitcher. He's from upstate New York. I don't mean Watertown, Rochester, up that way, Albany, but he's considered an upstate guy. He's a cold weather pitcher. He probably gets overlooked, but he was the Prep Baseball Report New York Player of, and that says a lot. I mean, that's if you get a chance to follow Prep Baseball Report of whatever state you live in, or for the states here in the NL Central, PA, New York, Illinois, Ohio, Missouri, Wisconsin, I would follow them. I mean, if you want to know the best players in your backyard, it's a great source. They're out on social media. They have their own website. You don't need to pay for all of the information. Some of the more advanced you do, but I mean, you can get a lot of great information on players. He tops out at 96. There's been reports that he went higher than that at times this year, but I think 96 probably is ceiling on his fastball. But really excellent command for a kid his age. So to get a high school pitcher that high, he gave up 5 hits all year. 5 hits all year across 41 innings. And again, in high school, it's not like college where you can pitch 150 innings, in a College World Series preliminary, or the majors where you can go 100, 110. You're not going to be allowed to overwork yourself. Okay. And in New York, there are limits, with the New York high school sports associations. 109 Ks across those 41, only 15 walks. The kid's for real. So the Brewers got themselves a nice pick. Now, when we say the Cubs have only the 5th best first round pick in the division, this was a really deep draft. So that is certainly nothing to be ashamed of. And I think their pick of Matthew Shaw out of Maryland will either be a Ryan Sandberg, just robbery kind of pick, or it'll be, there was other guys on the board and they took a gamble on him. I don't know that they're gambling. This kid oozes confidence. He oozes leadership abilities. By sheer will and hard work, he became a first-round draft selection in Major League Baseball, and the Cubs did that. I don't know if he will stay at shortstop. There's a lot of debate about that. But the Cubs have those Ian Happ, Nick Madrigal, Nico Horner, Morel type players that can play multiple positions across the infield. Javier Baez was one of those guys. The Cubs like that kind of player. So if he is more of a super utility guy, I think he's going to hit well enough to be near the top of the order. He does have some pop, especially the other way. I think the majority of his home runs in college were to either right or right center. So that tells you the kind of back control he has. He could make a quick rise. I mean, I think he's another guy that maybe with one full year in the minors could be on the major league roster in 2025. But, time will tell with all of this. Again, if I'm still around and you want to come back and tell me later what an idiot I am, you can tweet me at @SlasherBaseball. You can send an email to the show directly to me, slasherbaseball@yahoo.com, or you can join the conversation to discord.com. the Discord community. There are so many really exciting channels. There's been some great feedback, a lot of great comments already. We just kind of kicked this off the ground this month. So I encourage you to join that. Of course, follow Slasher Sports on social media at Slasher Sports. Go to slashersports.com. You can learn about all of the different programming. It's not just Central Intelligence. And in fact, we're adding a baseball podcast this weekend called ALN 30. We're going to just give little snippets about each of the 15 American League teams. Should be done in about 30 minutes. We're not going to time it. Okay, you're not going to have a 60 minutes graphic in the back with the stopwatch ticking. But ALN 30, that's going to kick off this weekend. I am the special agent in charge of National League Central Affairs, your host, Steve Feck. Thanks for tuning in this week. We drop new episodes every Thursday, so we'll be back next week. And let's hope that your team will do something that we can talk about next week on Central Intelligence.